Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back, Pigeons 420. I hope you guys are well and warm. Kicking it fly today. What a beautiful Monday it is. And I have to admit, I just did a little harvest and I'm kind of sitting on cloud nine right now. And I kind of wanted to share with you guys just my process for the madness and the steps I'm going to be taking to actually harvest my plants. I'm going about things just a little bit differently this time, and I feel it's important that we just have a little discussion about my processes and my steps so that I can pass it on to you. Now, of course, you guys know that YouTube suppresses just about all of our videos, so I found it kind of relevant and beneficial to do a little bit of a play-by-play along with the harvest videos or the garden videos that I update. So with that being said, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let's talk about the steps that I'm going to take to harvest my plants. So first things first, over the course of the last 2 or so weeks prior to harvest, I've started to really get up and close with my trichomes. I want to watch them develop from like that immature clear to that mature milky color. And of course, I want to see just a touch of amber. Now, you're going to see a touch of clear as well. There's going to be some trichomes that mature faster than others. Some aren't going to mature at all. So generally speaking, I'm looking for an abundance of milky trichomes. If I was to give it a percentage, I'd sit somewhere in and around, say, 60 to 75% milky, with say a touch of 10 to 20% amber, and that 5 or so percent of clear trichomes. And over the last 2 weeks of harvest, I've kind of gotten really up close just so that I could watch that progression. So 2 weeks ago, I really started to see that a lot of them were they were starting to get a little cloudy, but they were still generally more clear than milky. So as time progressed, I started to notice that they were really starting to mature and started to get a cloudy appearance to them. So that's something that you're really going to want to look forward to or look towards. Also, watering. Watering is another big important factor because it's not about how much water you're adding towards the end. It's almost about how little water you're adding towards the end. The plants themselves are going to start to consume a lot less water. I was going from a schedule of water, day off, water, day off, water. So it was every second day. Towards the end of harvest, it was now water. I was getting 2 or 3 days off, and then I'd water again. So coming up to harvest, I gave it that final watering, took a look at the trichomes, determined that they were ready to go, and then the next step was to let it dry out. It took approximately 4-ish days for the medium to dry out to a point where it's like ready to harvest. I did not want it to be too moist because the wetter or more moist it is as you harvest, the longer it's going to take to dry. And of course, you do want to prolong that dry period, but you don't want it to last forever. Next was prepping my garden space. I wanted to have a good quality dry space, and since I'm using a tent now, I figured why not use the tent to dry the plants in. So I made sure that I had my AC Infinity unit all set so that I had it around that 66 degrees freedom units and about that 55 to 60% humidity. And then once I had that dialed in, I knew it was time that we could chop these plants down and get them hung up. Hung them as an entire plant. So I tried to harvest as much of the plant as I could so that I could keep those stalks as one whole plant. Now, of course, I couldn't quite get it all as one plant. Those stems were like the size of they were huge. It was probably 2 inches across those stalks. So I couldn't cut it as an entire plant. I chopped each plant down to approximately 2 or 3 plant-sized branches, and then I hung them from the top of the tent. Now, over the next, say, few days/week, I'm going to keep a close eye on the humidity and the temperature in that tent to ensure that it doesn't go one way too high or one way too low, because should the temperature get too high, it's going to dry them out a lot faster. And if it gets too low, well, then I've got the chances of mold increasing because of the dampness of the tent. They are in complete darkness. I don't want any light to get into this tent. At this point, it's just a matter of trying to get them to dry without any exposure as possible, and a cool, dark place is going to be your friend. I left all the leaves on. I didn't take any leaves off. The fan leaves stayed on. Those sugar leaves stayed on. Everything stayed on the plant. This is going to allow the plant to slowly dry rather than getting sucked of moisture so rapidly. Ideally, I want my dry period to last longer than 10 days. You know, if you can get it in and around that 2-week mark, that's fantastic. But generally speaking, in these conditions that I'm in central Canada, anything over 10 days, I'm laughing. And that's really going to come down to the quality of the environment within my tent. And again, a huge shout out to AC Infinity, because I do have my inline fan still running. It's still going right now. It's on a lower setting, but it's going to help circulate that air in there and help regulate the temperature and the humidity. So huge shout out to AC Infinity for helping me save the game in my dry tent. Then, after about 10 days in the dry tent, that's when things are going to come down. I'm going to start to remove the bigger leaves and get like the abundance of foliage off the plant. Assuming they're ready to trim at that point, I'm going to give these girls a dry trim, going to get nice and tight to those buds to help ensure that we can get some high quality sex appeal when we bring the buddies over and they can take a look at the stash. Generally speaking, I am not going to dip into these jars for at least 2 weeks after they've dried. So they're going to be in a jar curing for at least 2 weeks before I do any sampling. I want these girls to get the best and most opportunity to just knock my socks off. And the best way to do that is to give them at least a 2-week cure. That's kind of that's my rule of thumb. No less than 2 weeks. I'm a huge believer it takes weed to grow weed. So if you cannot get a good 2-week cure, and I don't even think that's a good 2-week cure, I think that's a minimum 2-week cure. So if you can't get that week, you need to buy yourself some more herb so that you can last that cure. Do yourself a favor and get through this last chunk of the process with flying colors, and you're laughing. All that work really comes down to these next few weeks, and you can really blow 2 to 4 months worth of work in 2 weeks. So you don't want that. But if you follow the steps that I kind of outlined in this video, you're not going to go wrong. You're going to be okay. Get yourself a nice AC inline fan, get yourself a humidifier, get yourself a couple fans, and you're laughing. No direct air, but circulation of air. Guys, that's all the time I have. I appreciate you guys tuning in for this harvest discussion. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you guys know what to do with that. It's 2022. But until next time, guys, I've got a garden update coming for you at the end of the week. We'll see you then. Have a great week. Much love. Don't forget, you're awesome. Peace.